Bonjour tout le monde. Hi everyone. I am Nicole Boudreau with the Organic Federation of Canada. We are happy to present today a summary of the proposed changes to the Canadian Organic Standards. Today, the proposed modifications will be presented by Marie-Ève Levert, who is the chair of the technical committee, Alison Grant, who is the chair for the crop production group, François Labelle, who is the chair for the Livestock working group, Elodie Nadeau, the chair for the maple syrup production working group, and Rochelle Eisen, who was the chair of greenhouse preparation, organic composition, organic integrity, and permitted substances list in food preparation. I would like also to acknowledge the work of our colleagues such as Margaret Graves, Janet Wallace, Rebecca Wienhouse, Ariane France, and Desiree Jans, who have been involved, who are still involved in the review process. It's a big teamwork. So a period of 10 minutes for questions will follow each section presentation. Questions can be submitted in French or English. You can also start adding your questions in the chat box. The proposed modifications are the result of a 2-year process that started with the call for modification request launched in June 2023. We have received over 300 petitions. 13 working groups and task forces have held 175 meetings to prepare and submit the recommendations. And the Technical Committee on Organic Agriculture has held 4 meetings, including a 2.5-day in-person meeting in Gatineau. So after this session, we invite you to submit your comments, because it is a unique opportunity for you to ensure that the standards remain clear, realistic, and applicable while incorporating the latest scientific advances and best practices. Your comments are all considered individually. So far, we have contacted CGSB, and they have received so far 65 comments. So it's moving on. We know the public comment is ending on July 29. To find out the information, you go to OFC website, you see Organic Standard Review, you click there, and you will see all the documents that you need to see the CGSB version of the standard, to download the public comment form. And also you have another document that is called the background of the proposed revisions to the Canadian Organic Standards. It is a new type of document that we have prepared. You have all the standards with track changes and the rationale that explains why this modification is proposed. This is the form that you will use to submit your comment. Well, it's not very sexy, I would say, but you have to use this. You have to send your comment form to CGSB, to Astrid Lozano. You have the email inside the form. So you have to name the clause. You have to say if your comment is a general one, a technical one, or editorial. You propose your change. You name the change that is proposed, and then you make a comment. It's also good to suggest a correction if you feel that something was not well worded, or if something is unclear, or if it is a change that you don't want to see. So there is a form for 310 and another form for 311, 311, the permitted substances list. It is quite similar. So thank you, Marie-Ève, it's your turn.
Okay, thank you. I will briefly go and talk about some change made to terms and definition, and then I'm going to talk about section 4, the organic plan. And if you have questions after that, me and my colleague will be able to answer them. So let's start with agricultural. So we modify the agricultural definition. So it's now agricultural products and ingredient, and this was made to clarify when an ingredient loses its agricultural status, especially after heavy processing. This change is meant to prevent the misuse of commercially available clause, which was intended for true agricultural commodities, not highly refined derivatives. So, and we're going to talk about derivative after that. So in short, if an ingredient is too processed, it might not qualify for that exemption. So that's why we did this clause. So if we're at this new definition, so if we're looking at another modified definition, we're going to look at derivative. So the definition of derivative, really hard to say for a French speaker, derivative was modified to derive from biological and mineral sources. So it was made to further reduce confusion, as many thought that derivative was, in that context, meant something that is derived from, which is not the case. So the definition also directs the reader to Annex B to help everyone understand the intent of the standard with regards to input sources. So that's another important change made to definition. Another one is around radiation. So there are now two separate definitions: ionizing radiation, which is still prohibited, and non-ionizing radiation. So the new definition now includes the wavelength threshold where ionizing radiation begins. And this is also, the decision was made to also recognize that the non-ionizing technologies such as UV treatment in the standard, and they can now be used for pest and pathogen management on crops and food contact surfaces, and that's reflected in the PSL. And if you have questions about this, you can ask Rochelle or me later. Another important modification is related to sewage sludge. So the new definition of sewage sludge now excludes wastewater that has undergone secondary or advanced treatment, as this treated water is no longer considered as part of the sludge. And this modification was made because struvite is now permitted under the PSL, under column 1 of table 4.2 as a substance for soil amendments and crop nutrition. And my colleague Allison will be able to talk more about this during her section. And the other terms and definition that were included, and that my colleague Francois will be able to flesh out a little bit more around livestock. So we have big treatment, big trimming, compromised animal. We now have a definition on environmental enrichment and grazing season. So if you're in the livestock sector, please take a look at those. So if we're looking at the organic plant, so those were some of the important terms of definition that I wanted to highlight today. And if we're looking at the organic plant section, you're going to see a lot of change, but mainly is to provide more detail regarding the record keeping requirement. So usually the certification body will ask you for those already, but we just wanted to make sure that it was clear and in plain language in the standard. So let's look at 4 main modifications. So if you're looking at Article 4.2, so we clarified when the organic plan needs to be updated. Under 4.4.1, we also have a clause that's explicitly ask you to have a lot code or unique identifiers that is assigned to your product and visible on all non-retailer and at the final consumer sale unit, retailer final consumer sale units. That's a mouthful. So that's new and that was added. We also were conscious and wanted to give you a lot of example of what is an appropriate record and supporting documentation. So we did that in 4.4.2 and 4.4.3. And finally, at 4.4.e, we highlighted the fact that an operator should have able to document the role and activities of the intermediaries in their own supply chain. So those are the main change under section 4, and that's it for me. So we can maybe go to crop production unless we have a question. And I'm looking at the chat. So someone's asking a question, Nicole, more around the comments, how to make the comments. So Danielle is asking whose initial should we write into the member section of the comments form? Our own initial or not?
Yeah. Yes, your own initials.
Okay. Is there any question on that section?
Thank you,
Perfect.
Marie-Ève. Yeah, I don't see any other additional questions. Thank you, Marie-Ève. Alison, now about crop production.
Your mic? A classic mistake.
Well, good morning, everyone. So we're going to launch into crop production, follow that with the greenhouse section, and then we'll go into the permitted substances list. So first change was to 5.1.1, and that was really just a clarification that indeed a 36-month transition period begins upon termination of a GE crop when it's harvested or tilled, and that the operator will manage that land during that 36-month period to make sure there is no emergence of seed or volunteer growth.
Alison, can you speak a little louder, please? Your voice is a little low. Thank you.
Sure. Is that better, Nicole?
Yes.
Maybe it was my mic. Okay. 5.1.3, this is a brand new clause, and we are restricting the clearing of native forest, plowing of native prairie, or draining of wetlands for the use in agriculture. And this is specific to use in organic agriculture. So you will have to wait 5 years before it can be incorporated into an organic system. You'll see that I do have the language there. But we certainly thought that this one aligned with the principles of organic, and there are examples from around the world where this is being incorporated. 5.1.8 is a really big change, and we are allowing alternating between organic and non-organic production, which has always been prohibited, except now if there are catastrophic events that are out of your control, then it will be permitted, but not without due diligence. You have to report this to your certification body first and make sure that they are in agreement and that you indeed have a corrective action plan to avoid the same situation again if it is avoidable. I mean, a lot of this would have to do with climate change and probably weather conditions, but there are some other things that will be considered. So that is a fairly significant change. Next slide, Nicole. 5.2.3, again, we're discussing fence posts. It seems to bounce back at every standard revision, but we are now going to allow fence posts treated with prohibited substances by exception only for perimeter fencing to keep wildlife out and livestock in. We don't mention organic livestock in this situation, but indeed, Francois and the livestock section will have further requirements if the livestock is indeed organic. 5.3 is our section on seed and planting stock, and the first change is brand new. The working group certainly agreed with petition that any seed that is grown under your management in a buffer zone or in your transitional fields, they can be used within your own operation as seed without doing a search for organic seed. So this is I think a positive change, and operators will be able to recycle resources on their own operation without the burden of trying to find organic seed. 5.3.3 and 5.3.5, and I think 4 might be in there too. That section was really overhauled quite a bit, removing, separating the requirements for seed and annual planting stock from perennial planting stock. But at the end of the day, it's really about the needs for perennial planting stock that has been changed. And basically we've ensured that there is a clear distinction between planting stock, which doesn't include soil. It's bare root. It's a garlic clove. It's a potato seed, and the difference with a seedling and transplants, and those are in actual soil. So for the perennial specifically, non-organic strawberry plants that are bare root, not potted in soil, if they are untreated with prohibited substances, they can be used. And the first crop within a 12-month period can be considered organic. That's actually permitted at this point. What we are changing is that non-organic perennial plants, when they are in soil, such as those strawberries, they need to be under organic management for not less than 12 months before the harvest can be considered organic. So if you get organic seedlings or strawberry plugs, you can harvest those within 12 months. And if you can't get organic strawberry nursery stock in plugs, then you will have to have them under management for not less than 12 months before the next harvest can be considered organic. Next slide, please. 5.4.2, we felt the need to have more detail on crop rotation. We've eliminated the where appropriate because, you know, it's a fundamental part of organic production that you have a rotation in place. So you'll see the track changes there, that soil fertility and biological activity shall be maintained or increased through crop rotations or sequences. We added sequences, that was in the definition as well. It's the order of crops, and that it will be diversified, including plow down crops, legumes, catch crops, deep rooting plants. Cover crops to prevent erosion we've added in there, and more importantly, no more than 2 consecutive years of the same annual crop species when intended for sale or when intended for use. So if it's a cover crop back to back, maybe that's not an issue, but if it is you know, corn followed by corn, that indeed is an issue. So not more than 2 years. That section had been a little unclear, and there were some interesting allowances for crop rotations. 5.4.4, this is fairly new, the addition that soluble nitrogen and phosphate fertilizers needs to be 20% or less of the total crop nutrient needs. And this really, again, is supporting the fact that organic is about feeding the soil and not the plant, and it will indeed impact greenhouse producers. So there is going to be a period of time until 2027 to come into compliance. So that's fairly new, but again, supports the organic principles. 5.4.5, there is more detail on the requirement encouraging responsible tillage. I think there was a note that we've now, with examples, those examples have now been incorporated into the clause itself, and we have reiterated that you have to maintain records of tillage and cultivation. It's the only way you can demonstrate that you are indeed practicing responsible tillage. Next slide, please. Oh, okay, so that was it for the changes, the main changes in the crop production 5.0. And now we're going to move into 7.5, which is our greenhouse section, greenhouse and growth chambers. 7.5 is specific to or is a working group or a task force of the crop working group. So 7.5.3 was just modified to be clearer that indeed any of those clauses in the crop production section 5.0 that we just reviewed indeed applies to greenhouse production. unless it's in containers, and there will be those examples that would say, doesn't include crop rotation when you're doing container production. 7.5.5.1 was further clarification on the soil that is required in a container system, and that it is indeed supposed to replicate a live soil and not be inert substrate. And it reiterates that 2% by volume will be a mineral fraction of sand, silt, or clay. And oh, I see a typo. And that indeed means soil. And 10% will be compost, and a biological fraction, including microorganisms and macro populations, macroorganism population. And I just want to point out that this soil requirement indeed applies to the seedling transplant production in section 5.0. So you do have to have a live soil, again, that is compliant with this section to grow your own seedlings on site. Next, please. Sunlight, 7.5.7, that was incorporated in the 2020 review. And again, it's just some clarification that indeed it has to be the primary source of light. We're not talking about lights in a warehouse. You have to be able to grow that crop in a structure that allows enough light naturally to support photosynthesis, but indeed you're allowed to have supplemental light for shoulder seasons, bad weather, over winter. But there is clarification that seedlings and transplants, if they're produced on your own operation, can be under 100% artificial lighting until transplanted into the production site. It had said before until first transplanting, but these seedlings can be transplanted several times before they actually end up in their final production site, whether that's a container, whether that's in your field. This applies also to crop production, section 5.0. 7.5.12. This again really is just reiterating that all of the sections in 5.0 indeed, except for tillage, apply to greenhouse production. So I won't read that, but there is, without the track changes, what it looks like now. So there will be some, I guess one of the main things is that if you're creating a soil for a container production, which takes a lot of work and is quite remarkable if you've been in one of these large operations, you're going to have to use it for at least 3 years. You're not replacing it every year. And then 2 and 3 of clause B, subclause B, is that you can indeed dispose of plant debris as necessary. In the crop production, we'd like you to incorporate that, but not in this case, especially when there's disease issues that could be at play in a greenhouse production. Next slide, please. That might be it for that. So Nicole, should we take some questions on this before we launch into PSL? Do you think that's a good idea?
Sure. Yeah, good idea. So we have one question from Kimberly. Planting stock is a cutting which I have seen to make seedlings, just a cut of a plant.
Yeah, cutting
is a cutting sorry.
Yep, cutting is included in the examples of planting stock, Kim. So if it is, if you cut it off something and it's not in soil, and you're putting it in soil for the first time, and growing the roots out, then indeed cutting is considered under the planting stock definition.
Thank you, Alison. Is a summer fallow or a weed flush a cover crop, or must it be planted plow down crop?
I'm going to say that that's probably a standards interpretation committee question. And it would, I think, depend on how much cover you actually get. You know, do you have a good cover of crop, whether it's volunteer or planted or not? And that would be determined by your inspector and certification body.
Question from Sandy. Why is it 542? Why is it allowed for cover crops and not crops for sale? So 542 is I think it is the rotation over, not more.
Well, really, Sandy, I wanted to call it cash crops, and people were uncomfortable that would be a term that people would understand. But good point. I would encourage you to submit a comment on that, because I'm not entirely happy with how that sounds either. But it was meant to be clear that it was for annual crops and that it was for cash crops. So if it were, and the difference would be if I'm going to use a legume cover crop 2 years in a row where I'm incorporating everything back into the soil, then that's not going to, that's about soil building and organic matter, where an annual crop species is going to be taking from the soil. You're going to take the crop off, so there's going to be very little to incorporate. So I hope that helps answer the question.
And we have a question from Oswaldo Vasquez. Will 513 requirement will it be retroactive? So 513 is about that you have to
that's the restriction of clearing native
of
forests.
5 years.
Yeah, I think I know where this question came from. The core operating manual is fairly clear that operators have 1 year from the publication of a new revision to satisfy the new standards or new clauses. So I can't see how anybody is going. You can't go backward and say, hey, you added that to your organic system plan 2 years ago, but it was from clearing native forests, so we're going to remove the organic status. That's just not going to happen that way. But if it's not, if you have land that has not been incorporated into your organic system plan, that has been cleared from native forests, if it's not incorporated before the end of 2026 or 1 year after the publication of this standard, then yeah, you're going to wait your 5 years.
We have a question from Manitoba Organics. Would this apply to cash crops within the polycrop or only as a monocrop? I think this is a question again about 542, if I understand well.
I think you're asking if I've underseeded with another crop, does that eliminate the need to not repeat beyond 2 years a cash crop? I'm going to say that might be a sick question or worthy of a comment, but just because you have mixed species, the whole point is that the crop that you are taking off the land is taking away nutrients that has not been incorporated, and we're trying to break disease cycles with a crop rotation as well. So
sorry, Allison, if it's easier if I just unmute myself. The reason this came up in my mind as an example is we have a few farms in Manitoba in particular that are doing polycrops of like peas, oats, flax, and then we'll do flax again the next year. And then we'll do this 3 polycrop again. So in that standard, they are doing flax 3 years in a row.
that's right.
But
If that's what they're taking off, yeah.
Just wanted to confirm.
Yeah. That's worth a comment though.
Thank you. From Roxanne, will there be a guidance around what are considered water-soluble nitrogen and phosphorus amendments? How soluble is soluble?
I think it either is or it isn't. So if it's water soluble and uptake by the plant is what happens, then it's indeed soluble, which is different than incorporating legume crop residue or adding manure or compost to your soil. So I'm not sure, Roxanne, if
To
we
the
need
standard
to.
interpretation committee, maybe?
Yeah, maybe that is one, but we certainly discussed it on the working group. What the heck is the difference between soluble and non-soluble? And it seemed like the experts in the room were going, well, one's watery and can be uptake, that the plant, it's going to feed the plant and not the soil necessarily. So if it's liquid, chances are it's in the soluble.
Maybe a definition could be added.
I'd love a comment. I'd love
Roxanne.
a comment, Roxanne. That's a good idea.
We have another question from Daniel Tolizzetti.
Yep.
Daniel?
Yeah, thanks, Nicole and Allison. I just have a few questions. I thought it was easier just to unmute than to ask them in the chat. I guess first, my first question, just based on Roxanne's, has a good point about the solubility of nutrients. That was kind of where I started, but also, how do we measure 20% of what the plant's using? So what kind of metrics can we use?
There was a big discussion on that, and we really felt that there's enough resources out there and expertise that you certainly do indeed know what your crop needs are. You could simplify it even more so by saying this is the total nitrogen that I've supplied over this period of time, and this is the percentage that was soluble. We know if we're talking about a corn crop, and quite honestly, we know that people aren't using soluble nutrient on a corn crop, but if we know that the expectation is 200 pounds of nitrogen per acre to produce corn, then we know that we're not going to exceed 20% of that final nitrogen need with soluble. So more than 20% of soluble nitrogen. So it's hard to really pin down all the specifics, and maybe a sick question, Daniel, would help give some examples. But if I'm a greenhouse operator, in whether I'm container or in ground, I know what my needs are. I've been there and seen the calculations happen pretty quickly. So the challenge will be, I think, the expertise and knowledge of the inspectors, or how the certification bodies incorporate this into their applications. So you can certainly have to demonstrate ahead of time in your organic plan how you indeed determine the 20% and your total crop needs.
So,
yeah, Daniel, just one more question, because we have many other things to talk about. Please ask your another question.
okay, sure thing. Yeah, my next question. So the 7.5.1, you have it here. Biological fraction that supports root soil interactions and supports soil health. How's this measured?
It's either by volume or by weight, and it's almost a little redundant because your compost is certainly going to have a certain biological fraction. But if for example, I was just going to add mycorrhizae as a crop aid, then there would be, a certain volume compared to the total. So
how do you know what's benefiting soil root soil interaction in this case? So let's say there's already a biological fraction present in the media. How could you disseminate whether this is benefiting root soil interaction or contributing to soil health?
Oh, that's a good one. But I would jump to the conclusion that say if it is actually anaerobic bacteria or fungi, then indeed it's beneficial. Whether it's a small benefit or a large benefit like a mycorrhizae would be around the root system.
Okay, so just a quick example. Sorry, Nicole, I don't want to take up more time, but Fusarium, let's say a fungal species that bounces back and forth between beneficial and pathogenic. Technically, if you measure this as part of your beneficial fraction, it can contribute to your root soil or whatever, benefiting your root soil interactions, but is also pathogenic in some cases. So this is a bit of a tricky standard to, I guess, pertain to and interpret.
So Danielle, I invite you to submit a comment, I think, because
Yeah,
yes,
that's a-
we can go into deep agronomical considerations, and that is so interesting. But for the sake of time, please submit a comment, or if you also can send us an email if you have a specific question after the call.
Yeah, and I appreciate you diving into the weeds. There's my first agricultural reference there. But remember, it's about the composition of your container garden soil. So so measuring it after the fact, if it's already in something, is a little different than adding it. But anyway, yes, please submit questions and comments after the fact.
Okay, thank you,
Alison,
Nicole.
10 minutes for PSL.
Okay.
Sorry to time you like this.
Yeah. So crop production, PSL, certainly the trend was that we wanted to be clearer so there weren't any questions, and we wanted to ensure that input approval bodies, certification bodies would have tools and measurement tools to use to ensure that fraudulent activity is not taking place, or substances that increase nutrient analysis, and not rely heavily on simply affidavits. So animal manure processed, really, it's just replacing animal manure dried, and that it was meant to just be for physical processing, like pelletizing of whole manure, and not for more complex manure extracts. So that's why that was clarified. Aquatic plant extracts, again, sets limits on nitrogen and phosphorus, just to ensure that it is not from a source that we would consider unpermitted, and clearly to prevent fraud, and that yeah, and won't exceed what would naturally be occurring in an extract. Biodegradable plant containers, this was a big one, and I'm sure any of our market gardeners in the crowd will understand about paper pot transplanters, or and this is chains of paper that are adhesives are used. So we didn't add a new section to this, but we did incorporate it into the biodegradable plant containers. And indeed, you can leave it in the soil, providing that everything in it is permitted. And if it contains those adhesives that don't dissolve, but end up in the soil, then indeed you're going to remove the paper after the season. It's a lot like plastic mulch. You're going to remove it at the end of the year and make sure nothing's left to incorporate into the soil long term. Biodynamic preparations, that was just clarified to make sure that indeed we're talking about those according to the Demeter standard, which is a biodynamic standard. Next slide, please. Amino acids, this was one that probably wasn't flushed out during 2020, and it has now been eliminated in favor of two specific listings: hydrolyzed proteins of plant origin and hydrolyzed proteins of animal origins. And those were copied right from the European organic regulation. And this allows more precise approval, and making sure that indeed it's not by affidavit because there certainly are limits of the amount of nitrogen that will be present. Next, please. The micronutrients, this was a problematic standard or listing before 2020. It was just open, anything that was considered a micronutrient. In 2020, the language became very definitive and listed very specific plant essential micronutrients and not necessarily beneficials, and it's been totally eliminated in favor of their own listings, some of which were already there. Cobalt is clearly a new one. Each of these listings will have certain restrictions, the same for demonstrating deficiencies for your micros, and what forms of these trace minerals are permitted. Silicic acids is a new one, and it does indeed include these are the synthetic forms of silicates, and as a result there was no reason to actually keep the silicates listing, which will now be found under, it would just fall under mined minerals. Next, please. A listing for vinasse. It was broken down into the 3 different categories there. So it's just about precision. Chitosan, we're adding that. That's a new add. Coconut coir, we removed that from the plant and plant material listing because by rights, if it was produced using conventional practices or unpermitted substances during its production, it wasn't supposed to be permitted. And of course, coconut coir is important substrate to greenhouse operations more specifically, and there are some restrictions there of what's allowed in that coconut coir. Frass has been added as a new emerging source of fertility, and we also have a expanded insect clause in 310. Lignin and lignosulfates, that was just broadened, and just so people knew what all the examples were. Microbial fertilizers has its own listing now and removed from microorganisms and microbial products. That's just about precision, and it's really deserved its own listing and will have annotations related to that. And the extracts were also removed from the microorganism and microbial products and has its own listing. So again, that's about having precision language and operators and input approvals folks to have clearer language on what is permitted and what isn't. Ozonated water is brand new, is a crop production aid for foliar application, and this isn't ozone gas. It's very clear in the annotation that you can't use the gas, just ozonated water. And next one, please, Nicole. Plant material, that was clarified. It was being used far too broadly, and it's really clear now that it's about minimally processed plant materials. It indeed still says if it's from conventional production or treat it with prohibited substances, that it is only permitted as a compost feedstock. Seed lubricant, that was understood as being allowed under mined minerals, but what the heck, it's just better for the sector if we have a clear listing for it, so no one questions whether or not they are allowed to use the seed lubricant it ends up being from talc or graphite. Struvite, that's the really big one. And so struvite from a municipal wastewater treatment plant, extracted from that source is now permitted. Struvite was added to the 2020 permitted substances list. However, it could only be from animal sources. The working group did a huge deep dive into this. Struvite is considered a synthetic, but it is not soluble phosphorus. So, and you know, for somebody in the prairies that has alkaline soils, they probably don't have much of a recourse other than using a synthetic to introduce the phosphorus to their soil. So we've also added other sources. The animal source was already there, but there's a complete list of what sources the struvite can be, including this municipal wastewater, in hopes that as the world evolves, we'll have different technologies that will extract struvite from different sources. Guano was removed altogether. That was an interesting working group discussion that went on for a very long time. But guano from bats or seabirds that are have nutrient levels, nitrogen levels, actually aren't permitted in this country. Plus, there's all kinds of considerations of the people that harvest it and the viruses present. There is another guano called fossilized guano. At the end of the day, it's rock phosphate. This is how suppliers are even getting it into Canada. So we're just removing the listing altogether. And I've already said that the silicon, silicate, and silicates listing has been removed, but will be covered by mined minerals unprocessed. So again, the whole reason for this part of the journey is that the folks in the sector, like those of you who have showed up, that you comment. So these were just a couple of things to consider. You know, we've eliminated micronutrients. We've tried to cover every trace mineral or that might be used, but you know, is there something missing on the list? Do you actually use nickel? I can't imagine why, but you know, this is your opportunity to comment. Under the new listings of silicic acids, including potassium and sodium salts, does it really cover all the synthetic forms? You know, there's a question to consider. Next slide, Nicole. And again, we're adding struvite. This is a contentious issue. People really have to understand why we're doing this, and we are not going to allow wastewater as water. And I don't know if we got the comment yet, but I already proposed that I'll make it clear in table 4.2, and the working group will make it clear that the water listed in table 4.2 does not include this waste stream that's permitted to use to extract struvite. And Mediev has already pointed out that the sewage sludge definition was altered so that it wasn't contrary to the addition of struvite to the permitted substances list. And I think that's it for me.
One question only, because we have to move. There is a question in the chat, from Jared. If insects are fed raw manure from organic livestock and some remains undigested in the frass, is the frass required to be composted or only subject to the pre-harvest 90-120 day interval?
Frass has its own listing. I see that Tracy put something in the chat too, in the chat box as well. It's his own listing, and only those restrictions that are put in the annotation. And what I understand, like the SIC answered that question when we didn't have clear guidance or a listing for frass, that indeed you were going to treat it like a manure with the 90-120 day rule where applicable. But apparently, like worms, the pathogens aren't present when it goes through the digestive system of the insects. So no, you won't have to treat it as manure.
Thank you, Alison. Thank you very much. And don't forget, we're waiting for your comments. Now, Francois, you can upload your PowerPoint, please. Ooh, a blue cow. Blue?
Okay, so I'm just
Mets diaporama, comme ça on verra pas toutes tes
Oui.
diapos, peut-être. OK.
je sais pas. Okay. Okay, good. So you're seeing my screen, yeah?
Un peu plus fort.
Oh yes, okay.
Oh yeah.
Okay. Okay, so yeah, I've got a lot of slides. I tried to cover really the most important changes. I will describe them quickly, and I have all those slides as a reference if we need to go back for specific questions. But the idea is to give you an overview of the main changes we did. So we're going to look at the definitions, many changes regarding pasture, feed, health care, and living conditions. So regarding definitions, as it was told earlier, so we had some new definitions for poultry. So beak treatment is really about infrared. Beak trimming is really using a hot blade. So we wanted to make the difference for those two types of treatment, if we can say, for the birds. What is a compromised animal is really, that's really an animal that's not, that has a reduced capacity for transport. So we clearly describe that. Disbudding, that's for the horn bud specifically. This is very different from dehorning. So it's about cattle and goats, animals with horns. Environmental enrichment, we described that. So this is really tools or objects that are there for the animals to express their natural behavior. This is an additional enrichment that should be brought to the barn, for example. It does not include what's already asked in the standards. So we'll see examples of that later. And grazing period, we defined it, although it's always a general definition. So it's really, regarding the climate, the moisture, the soil conditions in your area. You can have for different reasons the grazing season may not be continuous, and of course you can extend your grazing season by different techniques. So that's really the definitions. Pasture, we were asked to define more clearly how we calculate the dry matter intake. So it's really on a daily basis. So that's what we clarified. And when we're talking about 30%, it's always about forage intake. So we made it clear every time we spoke about that. The main changes are in this part. So we added 2 items there. So the first on item 3 there, we understand that at the beginning and the end of the grazing season, you cannot start already at 30% in some, depending on livestock, but we allow for some lower percentage there. And the main change is really number 4, where we're asking for details about the grazing season. So when does it start? Is there some confinement periods? But mainly item 4.3 there, really the rotation details, how many animals, what size of paddock, and every day what's happening. So it's really, we want to have in fact access to either a grazing calendar or a grazing chart, something similar to that, to really show where the animals were going during the grazing season. So that's pasture for all the species, for all livestock. There's a change specifically for dairy cows, where we're asking them we ask the farmers to have the water source within 200 meters of the cows wherever they are on pasture. So that's really an important step for the cows to have this water close to them, especially with milking robots. We see some issues with that. That's why this standard was added. We have the section 6.2 origin of livestock and livestock products was reorganized completely. It's been updated and clarified. There's a lot of emphasis on producing sufficient replacement stock. There's a lot of changes that are, in fact, things that were clarified, not new standards per se, but more understandable, more clear for everybody. In the feed section, we're asking for the farmers to have well, some kind of a relationship with qualified experts, either agrologist, nutritionist, or experienced peer. This came in because we made some change in the ration. We'll see it later about the long stem fiber. So feeding is something complicated. We cannot just come up with some simple rules. So that's why we ask for the farmers to work with specialists on that issue. Regarding weaning for ruminants, we introduced 2 types of weaning depending on how the calves or the small ruminants are raised. So in number 1, if you have dam raised animals, you have to use fence line weaning or a way to separate the young from the mother gradually. That's one less stressful way to wean them. If in number 2, if the young animals are raised by hand raised by feeding them milk in bottles, we ask to have 5 days limit on the to reduce the quantity of milk. So it should be done at least for 5 days to come up with a good weaning effect. So that's the changes we made regarding the long stem fiber, the long fiber forage. That's what I talked about. We removed this part, the first part of 644. So if we have, we were asking for 15% of the total dry matter to be long fiber forage, 4 inches, 10 centimeters. We're not asking that anymore because there's other ways, much more interesting or much more that are more effective to look at the fiber in a ration. So that's why we ask for farmers to work with specialists with their rations. The rest is the same, but this part is removed. Regarding poultry and pigs, we defined what is a vegetable matter. We were asked to do that. So it's really a plant material. They should have access to plant material other than grain. And so what is grain? That's what we're defining here. Cereals, pulses, oilseeds, normally found in concentrate portion of a ration. What are acceptable sources are pasture, hay, straw, alfalfa pellets, corn cobs, vegetables, or fruits, or any things similar to that. This 648 is really the exception. That's the catastrophic event standard. We're clarifying that if you have to use non-organic feed, this will not have any negative effect on the organic status of the livestock for milk or for meat. It was not clear in the standard, so we clarified that. The whole standard has been reorganized, but that's really the main change that was done in this one. Handling of livestock. So this section again was reorganized. We have a lot of new points there. It's mainly to update the section with scientific research about handling livestock, really to have good practices in place. And the main change we did, that's what we have here, is 6.7, 657 and 658 about the use of electric prods. Before that, it was completely forbidden to use it. Now we're allowing some exceptions. That's what we have here, and it must be as a last resort when the animal have a clear path to move, and we have to go with the code of practice about that. But it's really for health and safety reasons that we can use it as a last resort. And if it's used, if the electric prods are used, then you have to document that and try to find ways to avoid it the next time. Healthcare. So we're introducing new standards there regarding the monitoring of body conditions, and also, again, similar to the previous standard about maintaining a relationship with a specialist. In this case, it's about it's with veterinarian, again, experienced peer or expert at the provincial animal health center, again regarding preventing and helping regarding health issues. Physical alterations. So this part again was completely refreshed, again with new knowledge about new scientific research about physical alterations. So the section, there's some general statements and at the beginning of the standard, and then specific allowances for different livestock. So we'll go through the general statements and look very quickly to the other ones, but it's too much details to explain it to you today. So in general, we say we should avoid physical alterations as much as possible. But of course, there are exceptions. When we have to do that, we shall use anesthetics and analgesics that are permitted in the standard, of course, in consultation with the veterinarian. Physical alterations should be done as young age as possible. Of course, after 24 hours of life, but as soon as possible, depending on the animals. Physical alterations must be done by people that are trained for that, with the well-maintained tools and the good techniques. Some physical alterations are still prohibited. You have the list here. We had caustic paste disbudding. The rest is the same, and preventative tail ducking of cattle. Then we go into the specification by species. So as you see, there's a lot of details, but we clarified that for each species, which was not that clear in the previous standard. So for poultry, you can see everything you can or cannot do. The same for pigs, cattle, sheep, and goats. So codes of practice are always a good reference. In this case, we didn't have updated version for sheep and beef. So maybe there's when the standard will be published, we expect people to look at those codes of practice for new regulation or new information about those two livestock. Going on with healthcare again, isolation of animals. So we have a description of how it should be done. Ideally, you try to have the animals close to at least one other of their species. If necessary, you can remove them, if they're so sick that they need to be completely removed. It's allowed, but it should be done, for a short time, and they should be going back to the other animals as soon as possible. But we have all the details about that in 667. 6610, we're clarifying the use of when we use antibiotics, for example. We clarified at the end that offspring of animals treated in the last third of gestation are not organic. So we had to clarify that. It was a specific petition about that. So that's for healthcare. Living conditions. We changed the standard about air quality. And it's updated with new knowledge there. So in fact, we're starting to ask farmers to take action at 20 ppm of ammonia, not at 25 as it was before. And we say it should not exceed, in fact, 25 ppm. And again, each code of practice, depending on the livestock, have their specific requests or demands for that. But the general statement is you have to check your ammonia level sooner and take action sooner too. So that's the 673 is the standard about the environmental enrichment, which we saw the definition earlier. So when the livestock are housed indoors, so that's really for into the barns, you have to provide at least one form of environmental enrichment, and that is something that's not included in the equipment that are required already. And then you have examples here. It should be in a table, but you have examples for each livestock, what kind of objects or tools that can be used to enrich the environment. So you have all the livestock there. So they are examples. It could be other things, but those are the main objects that can be used. 679, this is about using treated posts as it was discussed earlier. So we have the clarification on that, the details on that. So we say, so wood used for livestock fencing shall be untreated or treated with substances in table 4.2, except in the circumstances listed below. So A, existing fence posts treated with prohibited substances are permitted if they are in use on the production unit at the start of the organic transition. These posts may be reused within the operation as allowed in 678 B and C. If we're in B, if we're using new or reused fence posts with prohibited substances, it's permitted for exclusion or inclusion of livestock or wildlife on the perimeter of the production unit, but are not permitted for the interior subdivision. And C, new or reused fence posts treated with prohibited substances are permitted if the operator provides the documentation showing that they are required by law. So we had some examples where some farms are where it's mandatory to have fence posts, treated fence posts. So we have to show the requirements for that. So that's it for living conditions. Now we go into the requirements for specific livestock. Here, this is about herbivores. where we have a standard, well, the standard saying, well, outside the grazing season, the animals shall have access to an outdoor exercise area, weather permitting. So we're going to, we clarified as much as possible this standard, but the job is not finalized. So for now, we're just asking the operator to document the reasons and why they are confined. If they are confined, we will review this this clause in 2030. There was still a lot of unknown information that we need to find out for the next years, and then next revision will be making the final decision about this one on how we deal exactly with this time outside the grazing season for access to outdoor. One change was done for the adult beef cows regarding the space requirements. We reviewed all the space requirements for all livestock to make sure we were updated with the latest research. The only one place we needed to change was for these adult beef cows. So now we're asking for 9 square meters for heads that are 900 kilos. So if the farmers need to change their infrastructure, they have the note there says they have some time to do that. But yeah, that's the main change regarding space requirements. Regarding tie stalls for dairy cows, we were asked to clarify what is we're asking for 2 periods of exercise per week during winter time. So we were asked to clarify what is an exercise period and how it's done exactly. So we're clarifying it here. So for a period of at least 1 hour, if weather permits. So that's really 1 period of exercise. And an exercise period is defined as time when the cow is untied outside of routine handling procedures, such as milking. So for example, you had milking cows that were tied, they were untied to go to the milking parlor. So that's not considered an exercise period. It should be something else during 1 hour on, somewhere to exercise. The freestall, in the freestall system, we have a ratio to stall of 1:1. This is going to be revised next year because we had a lot of research to do about that subject, not enough information to make a decision there. So this is planned for the next revision. Unweaned calves. Now we're allowing in the organic standard right now, we're allowing for calves to be in individual pens. In 2027, it won't be allowed. So these calves will have to be paired or in groups as soon as possible. And the rest of the standard is really about exceptions. So when you have a large herd, this is more easy to do, to pair calves. But if you have a small herd, sometimes, the calves are just one calf of the same age. So there's a lot of exceptions regarding the size or the health of the calf. So you can still put them into individual pens if they don't have the right if they don't go with the standard to be put together. For poultry now, we have clarified 613.1, saying they have to complete for the outdoor area. It shall have completed the necessary transition period and been granted organic status. instead of what we had before. Regarding the nest space, we make a direct reference to the code of practice where you have all the details and specific area for nest space. The perches, by 6 weeks, we clarified that. So by 6 weeks of age, they shall have 10 centimeters of perch space or 100 square centimeters of platform space per pullet. So that's really much more clear for those pullet perches. 613.6 barn raised meat chicken. We had a note to review it by this standard. After all the discussion, the working group and the technical committee decided to go for 5 more years before re-examining all of that. It's really a big subject where we need to go to have a literature review really of what is happening, how to improve access to outdoor for meat chickens. In the table for densities for poultry, we had some change regarding the pullets. So you have the list here, what is done for now. We have two new types of pullets, 0 to 4 weeks and 5 to 8 weeks, with the densities for each of them. And we also added the line for ducks. We didn't have anything about ducks, so now we have an indoor density and outdoor, and also for outdoor runs. Yeah, the note for the pullets, 0 to 4, 5 to 8 weeks. We say it should be meeting the cost requirements or the requirements of the code of practice, whichever is a lower density, because at the time, the code of practice was not finalized. So that's why we included this note to make sure we have the lower density from either standard. Again, for poultry raised on pasture, we clarified what was needed. So even if you're raising chickens or poultry only on pasture, you still need to have a barn that meet all the requirements for for access to outdoor. So we clarified this part. Now for pigs, so we were asked to clarify what is the access to outdoor. So we're really stating that it's a daily access. So people were questioning that. So we clarified this part. We removed some parts of the standard regarding sows and gilts in group with some exceptions. So we removed this part regarding piglet protection and the use of farrowing crates, but at the same time we added a clear statement on what is allowed for confinement of sows. So I'm just looking at it clearly here. Confinement of sows in gestation crates or farrowing crates, or in another manner that prevents them from turning around, is prohibited, except for the period of temporary restraint. Sows may be restrained for a maximum period of 4 consecutive hours to protect the piglets or to protect the operator during piglet processing or pen cleaning. Sows shall have directly supervised while restrained and released as soon as possible. So really, we're really describing clearly how the sows can be restrained. And as you saw, they have to be monitored during all the time. Finally, we're saying, well, in the farrowing area, they should have access to straw to build their nests. So we didn't have any details about that. And we have regarding the weaning, we're still allowing to wean earlier by exception, but it should be documented. And again, this is another subject where we needed a lot more information, a literature review on that. So this weaning age will be reviewed at the next revision. 6.15.11, the minimum outdoor and outdoor space. So we changed we clarified, in fact, the table 7 here. You have it, the next slide here. So we clarified really that in fact the way the table was written was we were talking about indoor space and outdoor runs. We had those 2 columns, but it didn't make sense that the outdoor run was smaller than the indoor space. So that's why we clarified, and going back to the different references, in fact, the pigs must have access to both areas at the same time. So when the weather permits, of course. So that's why they have to go with total area density here, or surface area, sorry, for each of these types of pigs. We added also sows in individual pens. There was no references for that, and we clarified really that it was until weaning for sow and piglets. So all of that, now the table should be clear for everybody to be followed clearly for any type of animals in the pig barn. And I think, yeah, that's it for me. So
Thank
I
you,
don't know if
Francois. We can have 2 questions before it's already
Okay.
12:25 Eastern.
all right.
Are there questions in the chat? Let me check the chat. Alison, is the vegetable matter required for poultry and pigs in addition to the ration? Currently, alfalfa pellets or grains, shorts, wheat, chaff has been included in rations to fulfill the requirement.
Okay, so let me read that. If the yeah,
Because
so
I think do you have to add a vegetable matter, whatever the
Yeah.
ration is? If there is already vegetable matter in the ration, is it your question,
it's
Alison?
either way, it can be in the ration or beside it, depending on the type of products they use, but there must be some vegetable matter in one way or another. Yeah.
About air quality, if an inspector can visibly see a lot of dust in the barn, is the clause clear enough to report such a finding?
Yeah, well, it's not the as you saw, the standard was really about ammonia levels. Everything else, even for ammonia levels, it's not it's not that easy to deal with.
Yeah.
So everything else is it's not very clear for those ones.
So Francois, unless there's respiratory issues, we probably can't report dust or humidity problems unless there is documented
Well,
disease. I'm just wondering.
No, and I think dust normally it's really very for a specific time. Usually, you don't I don't know. I've never seen a barn that's always filled with dust, but yeah, if there's something there, it's very difficult to do something about that. It's really a matter of usually all the ventilation and the way you manage your manure you will end up with a good hair quality or not. So it's really the standard is really to avoid really high levels of ammonia that are really, really bad for the health of any
Yeah,
life. humans
And now,
included.
are there some specifications about dust in the code of practices anyway? Maybe I think the general state.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But
So
it's such a, basic basic management.
yeah, we cannot check everything. Okay, we have to move. Sorry, Alison. So I need to share screen. I think Francois, you should stop sharing, or maybe
Am
I
I still
can
sharing?
share. This will stop other sharing. Yes.
Okay, sorry.
Francois, I'm kicking you out, and now we go to the maple section with Elodie.
Hello, everybody. The topics covered in maple were plant diversity, tree diameter, and number of depths, use of cleaning products, deformers, reusable bulk storage containers, and preparation of maple sap. For plant diversity, the companion species to taped maple trees must be encouraged by aiming for minimum percentage of 20% of all trees instead of 15%. Increasing the requirement of plant species enables maple syrup producers to protect their operations while maintaining biodiversity that is beneficial to the forest ecosystem.
Was ist? Oh, rein Tomaten. Das ist so
Hallo?
unverschämt.
Carla, can you mute? I have muted Carla. Okay, go,
Okay,
Elodie.
thank you. For tree diameter on number of tapes, removal of the third tape for 2025 and increase in the diameter of the tree, 1.3 meter soil surface for the first tape from 8 to 9 inches from 2025 for new certified operation and for all operations in 2035, offering an optimal balance between yield and preservation. For use of cleaning products, for osmosis extraction on membranes storage, addition of citric acid, for maple sap collection systems, stubbing and tanks, removal of sodium hypochlorite in season, and for osmosis extraction and membranes for the production season, addition of citric acid, acetic acid, peracetic acid, and hydrogen peroxide. For deformers, alleviates the requirements specific to maple syrup production, since these are already covered by the standard. We had a section for reusable bulk storage containers. This section has been added to address the gap regarding the washing of reusable containers. And, oh, sorry. For preparation of maple sap, maple syrup production has been modernized with the creation of centralized boiling centers. These facilities enable maple sap from several producers to be processed in a single location. To maintain organic certification, these centers must comply with the specific cleaning and traceability requirements. That's finished.
We have one question. Elodie, what is expected for a client to report their diversity percentage in their maple stand to their CB?
They have to demonstrate the different action in place to increase the diversity in the maple bush forest.
Okay, I see no other question. We'll proceed to apiculture that I will present. So we have a change to 7.1.11.1 that was the subject of long discussions that now operators must have a plan to stop using non-organic sugar or non-organic honey. And they have to start feeding at least 5% organic honey or sugar to their hives by September 2028. So if you remember, the 2020 standard allows the use of non-organic sugar or non-organic honey, but it is the Canadian standards. They seem to be the only standard on the planet that are allowing use of non-organic sugar or honey. So we are trying, the technical committee and the working groups are trying to move slowly for the replace non-organic sugar or honey with organic sugar. So it is 5%. That we hope it's not too much. And then 7110 hives can be moved in winter to areas where there is only a 100-meter buffer zone instead of 3 kilometers. But when bees are not foraging and when they are preparing hives for bees for the wintering, the 3-kilometer buffer zone doesn't need necessarily to be maintained. And we have a new section for insects if you want to have organic cricket tomorrow morning. So it is a basically simple section. It is entirely new. And we have used a lot of clauses in the livestock section to build this section. It covers insects and other terrestrial invertebrates, such as snails, and most general livestock requirements apply. There is also a clause about the physical alterations such as that are prohibited, such as the trimming of wings or removing of legs. The method of killing shall ensure rapid death and minimize invertebrate suffering. And outdoor access is not required. You see that you can guess why. If your cricket go outdoors, maybe it will be hard to recuperate them. Are there questions about the insects or the apiculture before we switch to Rochelle's section? Okay, I see the rational document 4772 states that the CFIA will soon be implementing clear enforcement of safety issues related to insects used as feed. Is there any indication? Well, we had a hard time with this, and CFIA is building a regulation because insect is like a new production system, organic or non-organic, because insects they eat they eat manure, they eat the type of meat that is not allowed, the risky, they eat garbage. So it's hard to draft what is safe and what is not. So as it is now, because we're waiting for CFIA, the insect producer still has to demonstrate that the safety of his production. And but yes, we are waiting for CFIA. Will the slides be shared? Yes, all the recording will be accessible on the OXC website. So now I leave the microphone to Madame Rochelle Eisen, who will present organic integrity, organic composition.
Thanks, Nicole. And are you going to move the slides for me?
Yes, I will.
Okay, thank you. Okay, this is maintaining organic integrity section. There were a few changes made here, specifically in 8.12 regarding hand sanitizers, trying to simplify the standard so it aligns with practices that are out there. So hand sanitizers that are used on hands that come in direct contact with organic products. It's the active ingredients you are assessing only, and the only things that are not permitted now are synthetic dyes, synthetic fragrances, and high viscous extenders. And an example that we gave of that is a carbomer. So that is the change in hand sanitizers that should be making hand sanitizers easier to assess. In 8.15, what did we do here? Okay, so the key point in 8.15 is we were trying to ensure that organic ingredients and products, while they're being handled by an operator, are identifiable at all the time. So it doesn't matter if it's a finished product or if it's an ingredient, an organic, anything should be able to be traceable and clearly labeled, so it's easy for anybody who comes into the facility, like an inspector, to be able to see that things are distinguishable. So that's basically what happened at 8.15. It's just clarity on identification. No change, just making it more enforceable to actually say to people, look, you need identifiers on your ingredients and your products inside your operation. Next, please, Nicole. 8.23. What did we do here? Oh, yeah. All we did here is the onus when you were using cleaners before. The onus previously was that you had to show that what was listed, what was permitted, were not suitable. So we've moved that around, that when a permitted substance is unsuitable, you can use things that are not listed, and you just have to document why the permitted material was not suitable. What you're going to use will be appropriate because that's why you're selecting it. So it's basically the onus has switched to make sure your paperwork reflects why you cannot use the permitted materials that are already approved. That's what happened in 8.23. 8.32 is about pest management. And there were lots of changes made in this section, but it shouldn't really change most people's practices. We added clarity into the standard, differentiating between sticky traps for insects versus sticky traps for rodents. We also made it clear when glue boards could be used. Now, this is the most major change that's happening under the pest management. We have restricted the use of glue boards for rodents to times when there's an infestation. So glue boards can no longer be used in regular pest management program. They can only be used when there's an outbreak and you're trying to set back the population so you can implement a better management program. And the only other thing we added there was about humane disposal of rodents. And that's all that's changed there in 8.33. Onwards, Nicole. Okay, what did we do here? This is mainly about documentation. If you need to fumigate or fog, which means you're going to be using probably a product that's not on the PSL already, you are going to make sure you document that activity. That is all that we are saying in that part. And in section B, if you need to use a rodenticide, that will be that the rodenticide will be in a tamper-proof container in locations where there's no potential contamination of products, crops, or fields, and they cannot be used inside an organic product processing or product storage area. Again, no real change, just this probably spells out what we thought was happening on the ground, because these are good manufacturing practices anyways, and therefore this shouldn't really impact a lot of people dramatically. Onwards, Nicole. Okay, well, that was it for Section 8 in terms of integrity impacting every operation. Now we're going to be talking about product composition. So this is in manufacturing. One of the changes that occurred here is, how do I say that? It was really in B, in liquid products. And again, this is and in C, in solid, anything that contains a liquid product. In the 2020 standard, we had revised our standard to align with the US, where purchased water, so anything that came in with your ingredients had to be subtracted out. And the US has now reversed that back to, and so we're switching back where it's only added water at the facility that's doing the manufacturing that has to be accounted for. So this is a much simpler mathematical equation for most people to use. And that's all the changes that you're really seeing in A, B, and C there. So we can move on to the next slide, Nicole. Okay, one of the major changes that we made here that should actually simplify livestock feed calculations is we clarified, and this was done in conjunction with the livestock working group, so they're very aware of these changes that we made. It turns out doing the math for the livestock feed was, well, people were doing weird math and people were ending up with weird labels, like a livestock feed with a label between 70 and 95%, which didn't make sense because aren't you supposed to be feeding organic feed to organic livestock? Like what would be in a 70 to 95? So what was throwing off the math were salts, were supplements. And so the change that we've done in this revision is we've said, don't do any math. Just make sure that all your agricultural ingredients are organic and that other feed additives or supplements that you're using are listed in the PSL. Now, there was concern that this might lead to some cheating or whatever like that, but the cost of the supplements are so dear that people aren't going to add extra than they need, and also they could actually harm their animals. So there's a confidence that this will not be abused. It'll be monitored, but I think we've just made life easier for a lot of people trying to label livestock feed products. There you go. That's that change and 95% content. Okay, what we've done here, I think this was just a clarification in terms of recognizing aquaculture ingredients. So now aquaculture ingredients can now be used in the manufacturing of organic products. This is a delay because 32312 had not been implemented or promulgated at the time when we published in 2020. So this is just a catch up to make sure that people who want to make seafood lasagna can now make seafood lasagna. There you go. Onwards. Okay, switching over to the PSL. This is going to sound a little complicated, but we used to have a listing that was called yeast food, and it was substances that you could feed to sustain a yeast culture. And that was mainly for alcohol production, for wine production. Because we have vinegar manufacturers now, we have beer manufacturers, we have a lot more people involved in fermentations and things like that. We had to modify the listings to broaden them to be more inclusive of different alcoholic products and vinegar products. So instead of a yeast listing, we now have two listings. We have the dibasic ammonium phosphate listing and a potassium chloride listing, and just allowing the use of these feeds, these substances to feed yeast production in any type of vinegar or alcohol production. That's all that's really happened here. Next. Okay. We have duplicated the 6.4 listing for acids into 6.5. So basically anything that was being used as an ingredient as an acid can also be used as a processing aid. Again, just trying to make it easier to use the standard. One of the more significant changes is with the glycerol listing in 7.3. So this is the cleaning section. Up to this revision, all glycerol, even used for cleaning, had to be from organic sources if they were commercially available. and they had to be sourced from vegetable oil or animal fat, and they had to be produced by fermentation or hydrolysis. Okay, so now we've changed this, that for glycerol that's being used on contact surfaces, including hands, there's no restrictions. It can be any source of glycerol. But if you're using the glycerol to come in contact with an organic product, then the same restrictions that were previously in place, the being sourced from a vegetable or animal fat or being produced by fermentation or hydrolysis, are now in place for glycerols that are in contact with organic products. So this should to use glycerol. And oh, my internet connection is unstable right now, Nicole. I apologize. Hopefully it's come back on. Okay. Anyways, that's it for glycerol. Moving on, I think almost to the last bit. Okay. Now this is the detergent listing in 7.3. Actually, that should be 7.4, Nicole, not 7.3, but it's not going to really matter. Detergents, but that's okay. We have, oop, don't move the slide. Detergents, it was an SIC question that was causing a few challenges for operators, and the working group decided to clarify what the true intention was. And so we've added a second clause, subclause 2, into the detergent listing, which says that if the detergent is composed of OECD biodegradable and surfactants and any other substances in table 7.3 or 7.4, the detergent would be allowed.
Nicole, can you mute Leonard, please?
Yeah, it's what I'm trying to do. I don't know why it doesn't work. Okay, go, Rochelle.
Thank you. Okay, so and so basically, either you're going to establish that your detergent is OECD compliant, that's biodegradable to the OECD, and that would means it has ingredients that are not listed on the PSL, or you're going to have a detergent that is mainly made of surfactants that meet that requirement, plus other substances in the PSL. So that should eliminate some research for some people if they have a detergent that is made up of compliant components. They won't have to do any extra homework on that one. Okay, and the only other change here is in 7.4, we added methane sulfonic acid, sulfonic acid, and it's basically another acid to help people with cleaning. It's not as acidic as nitric or sulfuric, so it's there's less potential of environmental harm, but it gives people more opportunities to do formulations where they need an acid in their cleaning products. Nicole, is that it for all the slides? Oh, there's more. Okay. I think this might be the last one. Okay. In the PSL in 8.11, this is a very important clarification. We clarified that pest control materials are not subject to 1.4 or 1.5 of 32310. So those are the prohibitions, like genetic engineering, nanotechnology. So there's no reason why any person should have to evaluate a pest material to 1.4 and 1.5, but the standard didn't specify it. So now we've added this clause, eliminating any potential problem with this. The same edit was done for cleaning products as well in 7.1. Baits. This was one of the hardest annotations. This little annotation caused a lot of problems because in 2020, the substance name was baits for rodent control bait stations, and the annotation was blank. And we thought, okay, that means people can use whatever baits they want, but that created confusion in itself. So this allows people to understand that non-poisonous baits can be used in bait stations and to control rodents where there's no chance of contamination. So this can be used in a facility, it could be used in crops, in fields, but these would be non-poisonous baits only that we're talking about. So that would not include rodenticides that are commonly used on the exterior of facilities in bait stations. Okay. And the most really inspirational change for me is 8.2, where we've now changed the clove oil listing to botanical oils. We've broadened it out to cover a wide range of oils, specifically in the mint family, the celery family, and the clove family, that they can all be used as post-harvest sprout inhibitors. And this is a true reflection of advancements in science since we first added a clove oil listing. And this should just be applauded that the industry works so well together with researchers to establish what was actually working and is effective for sprout control. And Nicole, I think that's it for me, isn't it? Did I do it?
think so. Next
Yay!
slide is the list of our sponsors. It needs to be longer, but I would just like to acknowledge the actual sponsors. We still need double this, but let's thank all the sponsors that are now helping to cover the cost of the review. So stop sharing. Thank you very much for the patient people who are still online. We will probably tomorrow, the recording will be posted on OFC website, and I will share a message to announce that it is shared. Of course, you know where to find the comment forms. Please submit your comments. It is important. We need the vision of consumers, of producers, of all type of operators. Thank you very much to the chairs. You've done a great job. And we'll see you in French next week. Bye-bye.